everyone, and thank you for joining us for yet another Hana with a Purpose. Today, you're in for a treat. We have the one and only Alice Inoue from Happiness U to share with us about the many facets of change. For those of you that have attended our Hana with a Purpose in the past, you know that her events have been well worth our time. But for those of you that don't know Alice, Alice is a life expert and the founder of Happiness U. She's the author of 8 nationally award-winning books on life, wisdom, self-growth, and happiness, and has 2 weekly columns in the largest publication in Hawaii, The Midweek, called A Mindful Moment, and the Star Advertiser called Positively Young. Through Happiness U, she helps both companies and individuals develop a positive mindset in order to live a more inspired life in both their professional and personal life. Let's head over to Happiness U in Kaka'ako to learn more about how to deal with the many facets of change. Alice?
Thank you, Troy. Thank you so much for having me here again today. So, hello everyone. Today I want to talk to you about change, and I've called this Mastering the Many Facets of Change simply because we've been going through so much this past year, and I'm hoping that today will give you a little bit of an understanding of what you went through and how you got to where you are today, and also just to help with any kind of change, because as you know, change is happening every second. Everything is changing. Our thoughts are changing. Our skin is changing. Our ideas, our beliefs, people around us, the environment, the economy, change is really constant. And when too much change happens at once, it can get really difficult. So I always talk about how change is hard, especially when we didn't ask for it. And I think that when we want change, sometimes it's hard. When we don't want change and it happens, it's kind of hard. So my whole talk today really is, how do we make the changes that we want to make, and how do we accept the changes that we don't want so that we can thrive in life? So do you guys remember the life stress list? Sometimes I offer this talk and it's a little bit, I guess I have younger audiences, so they don't remember this. But back in the 60s and 70s, they came out with this life stress list, and they had these numbers, right? Death of a spouse would be a huge life change and stressor. Divorce would be next, and it goes all the way down. And they say now that life is 44% more stressful today than it was back then. And I really think that it's even more stressful now, given all that's going on with the pandemic and what we've been through. So think about this, acceleration. And this has been happening long before the pandemic with all the technology that's come in. As life accelerates, we're really forced to change in ways that sometimes we don't really want to. Now, I'd like to introduce to you this concept that we currently live in a time of what I call permanent white water. Now, this is a time of ongoing uncertainty and turbulence. So think about what it's like to be in like a rafter. So here you're seeing an image of rafters. Now, these rafters go out and they expect to get thrown over. They expect that they're going to get thrown out of the boat. And what they do is they train to get back onto the raft. So they expect the white water, and they are prepared to get bounced out, and we also should, given life where we are today, being really prepared for anything and everything, and we can train for that, and I think that's really interesting. So my purpose today is to help you develop the understanding, the attitude, the mindset, and the actions to not only understand change, but to adapt well and really be positive no matter what changes life brings to us. And we are still in that mode of adjusting to what this next normal will be. So today, in our very brief time together, and I'm so grateful for Troy for offering this to me to be able to share with you, we're going to talk about a couple things. Number one, why is it that we do not like change? Number two, how do you create change that you want? And it could be as simple as you want to go to bed earlier, and for whatever reason, you just can't seem to make that change. And we're going to talk about change that you don't want, which we've all been through this last year. And finally, the mindset that we can all cultivate for adaptability, for resilience, and really just to thrive in life versus being afraid of what life can bring us. So let's just jump into part one. And in order to understand all that I'm sharing with you about change, I want you to understand our brain. And that's one clue to understanding why it's so hard to go through change. Now, your brain has a goal, and that goal is certainty. You may have a goal, finish your work, feed your kids, but your brain, all it cares about is certainty. And change equals uncertainty. And because your brain feels pain, it wants to avoid it. So anytime there's change, there's pain. So there's actually a study that I read that when you cut your finger, you feel pain, right? And a certain area of your brain will light up. When change happens, even though you don't feel physical pain, that same area of your brain lights up, which means that it's painful when change is thrust upon you. And so we want to do everything to avoid it. We are literally hardwired to resist uncertainty. So that's why it's hard when change happens, because when there is change, we as human beings, our goal really is to survive. So if we know where our food is coming from, if we know where our support lies, then we feel safe. The moment change happens, our brain goes into this panic mode. But the good thing is that because we have a higher consciousness, a higher mind, we can actually be trained to thrive in change. So when we understand it, then we don't have to be afraid of it. Now, I want to introduce you to your brain. You may think of your brain as one brain, but you actually have two sides to your brain. There's a thinking side of your brain, and then there's a feeling side of your brain. So the thinking side is your higher mind. This is where you strategize, where you say, well, I know that going to bed earlier is good for me, or I know that eating healthier is better for me. But then the other part of our brain, it's the feeling brain. It's the brain that says, the side of your brain that says, I just want to eat what's comfortable. I want to do what I want. So it's the feeling side. So we have two sides of our brain. I want to demonstrate this with you. So right now, as you're watching this, cross your arms. Just cross your arms. Okay, it was easy. You didn't have to think about it. Now I want you to cross your arms the opposite way. So try it. So what happened? It was easy the first time because that was your feeling brain. You've done it so many times, it became a habit that it's just comfortable. Everything in your life you've done so many times that it's comfortable, it's certain, you can depend on it. When I asked you to change the way you cross your arms, some of you might had to think like left over right, right over left, and it feels awkward. So that's the two sides of the brain. We always want to do what's comfortable, even though we know that there's the change is good. So I hope that kind of makes sense to you. So again, one brain, two absolutely independent systems and how they operate. So again, rational side, it's reflective and conscious, it's thinking. And then the other side, which is your emotional side, it feels the pain, it feels the pleasure, it is the feeling brain. So that's why change is so difficult. Now, the habits that you have created over time, they were deliberate choices. And the more you do it, the more automatic it becomes, right? So when you first started driving a certain way to maybe a new job or a new area, it was awkward until you could actually do it almost in your sleep. So how many of you have driven home and not even thought about it, and all of a sudden you're home and 20 minutes later you're like, oh my gosh, I'm home, I don't remember the journey. That's because your feeling brain took over. You automatically knew where to turn left, where to turn right, what lane to get into. Now, if you think about when you have to go somewhere you've never been before, you're unfamiliar, your feeling brain is not there, your thinking brain is on. And so you're alert and you're thinking your way through it versus feeling your way through it. As human beings, we want to feel good. We want to feel happy, we want to feel joy. So the change that happens, if we don't like it, we can feel very uncomfortable with it. Now I want to introduce to you a concept, the elephant and the rider. Now, if you think about it, this is actually from another psychologist. His name is Jonathan Haidt, and he had a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, and I thought this was a really good example. So the rider represents our rational side. The elephant represents our emotional side. So two sides of the brain. So if you think about it, it looks like the rider's in charge. The rider says, go straight. But if the elephant doesn't want to go where the rider goes, the rider's outmatched. This multi-ton elephant decides to go one way, it's going to go. And that's like our emotional side. You say, don't eat the chocolate cake, don't eat the chocolate cake. But if the elephant, which is your emotional side, wants the chocolate cake, it's gonna just go and eat that chocolate cake. And you're gonna say, like, what is wrong with me? I know it's not good for me, but yet that's a perfect example of the thinking brain and the feeling brain and how they work. So ideally, what do we wanna do? We want to get that elephant on board with the rider, right? We want your emotional side to get on board with your rational side so you can get to where you need to go. So when the elephant disagrees with the rider, here's some of the things that could happen. You could overeat, oversleep, procrastinate, skip our work, get angry, blurt out things we regret, and on and on. So the elephant is looking for that quick payoff, whereas like eating chocolate, whereas the brain or the thinking brain knows about the long-term benefits, which is being healthier or not gaining weight. So I think you can probably understand this kind of conflict happens with us all the time. So what happens for success? Our success is when the rider says, this is the direction, and the elephant provides the energy. So this next section is about change that you desire. You know, like stop procrastinating, get healthier, exercise more, go to bed earlier, be more patient. All of that change that you want is really just a matter of getting your elephant to go in the same direction. So Lao Tzu said that if you don't change direction, you may end up where you're heading. And isn't that the truth? So we want to make sure that you're heading in the direction you want to in your life. So as I shared with the elephant and the rider, knowledge doesn't change behavior. We know it's good, but it's hard to do it. So self-control, I want to talk about that for a moment. It is an exhaustible resource. I don't know if you know this. It's kind of like lifting weights. The more you lift weights and the more reps you do, the less energy you have at the end. And your behavior is like that. Anytime we have to really think about something or we have to really put a lot of intention and focus into it, we run out of that intention and focus by the end of the day. And like I said earlier, when you drive and you don't remember the road, or you're taking a shower, or you're making breakfast, lots of our daily activity is what we call habitual. It's the feeling side of the brain. We just naturally do it. We burn up self-control when we want to make changes. And so I have a little method that I can share with you on how do you open up perspective so that your elephant and rider, your thinking and feeling brain kind of come together. So basically, if you control yourself all the time, it's going to take a lot of energy. And that's why change is so hard. It takes so much energy. That's why we're so tired now, because we've had so much change. We've exerted so much energy. We've had adrenaline all year long. And then now we're sort of dealing with an adrenaline crash where we're a bit less motivated than before, a lot tireder than before. It's simply because we've put in so much effort. So to recap, the bigger the change, the more self-control, the more energy it takes. And change is hard because it wears us out. Literally wears us out. So if you want to make change easier, you want to get your elephant on board, we want to start to look at all the advantages that change will be. Because if we understand the advantages, we tend to do it, right? Anytime you make a choice, we're always making the choice for the greatest advantage. And if we stack up the advantages, then we have more of a propulsion, more of a desire to do those things when we see the advantage. So let's just say that, as an example, you want to get up earlier, or you want to go to bed earlier. That's your thing. You want to get to bed earlier, but some reason every single time you know you should get to bed, you just can't seem to get to bed. So I want to give you an exercise to do. So stick with me for a moment as I elaborate this exercise, because it is one of the best things I have found in my life to be able to make the changes I want. It opens up your perception of everything. So it's why do you want this change? You just get a little notebook out and you just draw a T. On the left side, it's gonna say, list the disadvantages of not making this change. So what are the disadvantages if you don't go to bed earlier? And on the right side, you're gonna list the advantages of making this change. So right here, we're engaging your thinking brain. So we use your thinking brain, and you're gonna be both general and specific. So I'm gonna give some examples of this to help you really bring whatever change you wanna make into your life. So here's an example. General disadvantages of not making change. I'll get more frustrated with my family and work situation. I'll have increased stress to my body, leading to more sick days. These are just things you're writing. You'll retain more weight, you'll be grouchier. You can see all of the general disadvantages. Now, you take the first one, and I highlighted it. It says, I'll get more frustrated with my family and work situation. Next, write down some specific disadvantages of frustration. Well, if I'm frustrated, if I yell at my family, they'll think I don't love them. If I'm tired and frustrated, I will alienate them. If I'm frustrated, I'll feel disconnected from them. You get it? So mostly what you're trying to do is saying, why should I? What are the general advantages and the general disadvantages? Now you go to the other side of the table. I want to go to bed earlier. What are the advantages if I do? Okay, so then you write general. I'll be healthier, I'll feel better. You go through the list. I'll strengthen my immune system. Then you take one of those and make it specific. So if you choose healthier, then specifically, what are the advantages? Well, I'll have less medical expenses. I won't spend as much time and money on medicine. I'll get sick less often. So what happens when you start to detail all of these thinking side of your brain, it helps to open up the emotional side, because the emotional side wants advantages. When you're eating that chocolate, your mind is saying, no, that's wrong, there's too much fat, you're gonna gain weight. But the emotional said, I don't care, there's an advantage, I'm gonna feel good. So by doing this exercise, you actually help your emotional side of you to recognize the benefits of the change, and it makes it so much easier. So basically, if you manage your focus, you're going to be able to make some changes. And recognizing that an uncomfortable part of change is you have to give up something. So you might give up scrolling on Netflix, you might give up whatever it is, but you know that that's okay, because the advantages of going to bed earlier are going to be all of that which you just figured out. So instead of thinking about what you'll be missing, you want to focus on the positive reality of everything that you're going to be experiencing. This next segment is really valuable. When I was being asked to create some talks and presentations on change, I learned this, and it helped settle my mind, so I'm hoping it'll help settle yours. There's something called the process of change, and you can look at this state. I'm going to go through the stages of change, and you can see where you're at and start to understand how it is that you are where you are today. So stage one is status quo. Life is happening as it usually does. So wherever you are, whether it's change you want to make or change that happens to you, you're just going around your life. So let's think of 2020 February-ish, January, February, we just started a new year. We're going around as we always do. Stage two is called disruption. A foreign element is introduced. Either you decide to make a change or a change is thrust upon you, right? So we could think of this as when the lockdown happened, it was thrust upon us. Stage three is the adjustment phase. This is the messy part where you have to find your way through the disruption. This is where uncertainty thrives, and this is where we get really stressed. Then we get to stage four, which is the new normal, and this is the new status quo. Now, anytime that you have ever gone through change, whether you want it or it happens to you, you go through these four phases. Life as it normally is, you decide to go to bed earlier, or the pandemic happens and quarantine closes. Third, all this disruption, all this chaos, and we figure it out. Before, how could you work at home? We can't. How could you do this? We can't. There's so many things we thought we couldn't do, but when we were forced to do it, we were forced to adapt, rearrange, regroup, and reach that new status quo. Now, what made it so hard this past year was we kept going from like 2 to 3 to 4, and then back to 2, and then to 3, and then to 4, and back and forth. So we are exhausted. Right now, there is something called the pandemic wall. pretty much everyone has hit the pandemic wall. And what that simply means is feeling like we've run out of energy and no more motivation to go on. But somehow understanding this process of change can really help us gain more of our energy back. So one thing that I do want to bring up is that there are 3 things that we have control over in life. When change is happening, we feel we don't have any control, but we do have control. And the 3 things we have control of are, number 1, our perspective, how we see things, how you look at a situation. And you know that there's as many perspectives as there are people in this world. One event could happen right before us, and if there's 10 people watching, 10 people will tell 10 different stories from their perspective. We control how we look at a situation. The second thing we control is our decisions. The third thing we control is our actions. We have control over our perspective. The bigger our perspective, the more information we have, the better decisions we can make, and the better actions we take. So it really comes down to, how are you looking at what's happening around you? You have control, and when we're out of control, knowing what we do have control over gives us a sense of what? Certainty, right? Remember I said in the beginning, all our brain needs is certainty. So even if there's uncertainty swirling about, if we can create certainty in our mind with the situation we're in, we will feel much more in control, much less stress, much more balanced. And I do want to let you know there is no such thing as fear of the unknown. I think in the early days of the pandemic, people were just so scared, and I would say, what are you scared of? And they'd say, it's the unknown. And the truth of it is, we're not afraid of the unknown, we're afraid of something. And if you can ask yourself, what is it that you're truly afraid of? Then we can develop a strategy around it, and we can define it. So once you define it, you're certain. If you say it's unknown, then it's uncertain. It could be one of a billion different things. Of course, it's going to be scary. So as an example, I remember talking to someone, they started getting anxiety March, April, May, June of last year, and they couldn't figure it out. They still had their job, wife had her job, kids were healthy, everything seemed set, but yet all of this anxiety. And when I said, what are you afraid of? It was the unknown. So when we finally drilled down to what it was, it had to do with them owning a apartment building that they still had a large mortgage on. It was a very low income, a very simple place, and they were really afraid of that. So once we defined it, then we knew. So once you define something, you can actually determine a strategy should that come to pass. So when you identify it, you say, okay, if the worst case happens and this happens, what am I going to do? Who am I going to talk to? What arrangements am I going to make? So you develop a strategy around the fear that puts your mind at ease. So I found that to be very, very helpful. Now, the other thing I want you to remember, you may have heard me say this before, is that 92% of your fears don't manifest. 92%. And the 8% that do, it's never as bad as you imagined. So think about it. We worry, and you've had this experience as well. Go back in your life and think about things you worried about, and then you realize, like, wow, it never happened. So we spend the bulk of our time worrying about what's not going to happen, when in fact, the reality is 92% of our worries don't happen. They found that they did this study, and I've always known that more of your worries don't happen, but we finally got a number because they did a study where they had everybody in the study write down small worries, big worries, future worries, present worries, and then check. Small worries could be my hair getting humid when I go outside, to big worries like my pet has cancer, I wonder if they're going to die. All the worries were written. At the end of a week, a month, a year, looking back, every single person had this experience. 92% of the worries didn't happen. So if right now you are worried about something, focus on the 8%. Don't worry 92% of the time. You only need to worry 8% of the time. And what was so interesting was the study showed that 8% of what does happen doesn't happen as you imagined. Now, why is that? When we envision the future, we only see the worst case, the negative scenario. And then our brain, what it does is it goes back in our history of what we've ever read, known, or experienced. It pulls out all the worst scenarios and it creatively creates a negative scenario in the future. But we forget that in life, when we get to a challenging space, it may be challenging, but there's support. We have people that come through for us, opportunities, synchronicities, situations, circumstances show up that we couldn't have anticipated. And that's why the people in the study said that even when a fear manifested, it wasn't as bad as they imagined. So I want you to really embrace this and remember it, because when we think about something and it makes us feel fearful and scared, our whole body experiences it as if it actually happened. That's how powerful our thoughts are. I mean, if I asked you right now to imagine sucking on a lihimui or having a lemon wedge in your mouth of sour, acidic lemon juice, your mouth starts to salivate. So just a vision can affect our body. So that's why when we are stressed out a lot, worried a lot, we age very, very quickly. So if anyone here is sort of like worried about how they look, then we want to stay away from worry. But I thought this was such a great stat to be able to bring into our minds. So remember, to worry in proportion to the likelihood that this event would actually happen. In this final segment, I want to talk to you about some things that you can do, habits that you can cultivate that will really help you create more ease to really adapt to any change that life may bring you. Now, the first one I want to talk about is how to calm your brain. And you may have heard of this before. If not, it's a godsend. Now, it's called 4-7-8 breathing, and it brings peace back into your brain. Now, this is what you do. You inhale for 4 counts. You hold for 7 counts, and then you exhale very slowly through your mouth for 8 counts. So it's not 8 seconds or 4 seconds, it's just 4 counts. So if we're gonna do it together, let's do it together right now. So go ahead and inhale for 4, hold for 7, and then exhale for 8. Do it one more time. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. You should feel a sense of everything coming into a really calm place. Now, why does it work? When we're in panic or when we're a little bit anxious, we breathe shallow. When we breathe shallow, we bring less oxygen to our brain. And remember, our brain needs to survive. We as human beings need to survive. So all of a sudden, our whole body goes into sort of this panic mode. When you do this, what I call 4-7-8 breathing or calm breathing, you end up switching the signal. So you're telling your brain, all is well. Now, the best thing about this is if you are the type that wakes up in the middle of the night and has a thought and the thoughts just start going and then you can't get back to sleep, before those thoughts even start, once you're awake, just start doing calm breathing. Within 3-4 times, you'll be back asleep again. It works 3 out of 5 times for me. So it's been helpful to anyone who knows this. So 4-7-8, inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale very deliberately and slowly for 8. So that's my first hack. I love that one. The next one I want to talk about is something that you can immediately implement when change happens. And I call it the 3 A's. And it's something that I came up with because when the pandemic first started and we went into lockdown, I was asked to go on to one of the news stations to give people some tips, like what could we do? And I thought, what's good? What's easy? What can we do in times like this to literally calm ourselves down? So I called it the 3 A's, and what they are accept, adapt, and allow. So accept, adapt, and allow. And so I'd like to explain these to you. Accept. Anytime something happens that you don't want, doesn't matter. Somebody doesn't show up to an appointment, your car breaks down, whatever it is. The sooner we accept, the sooner we can start moving forward. And I want to give you an example here. Think of when you might lock your keys into a car. If you lock your keys into a car, usually we say, oh no, we beat ourselves up, we try and check the doors to get in, but what happens? It's not until we accept that the keys are locked in the car, that we actually start thinking, what can we do? Do we call AAA? Do we find our extra key? So in times of great changes, and it's change that you cannot do anything about, it's happened, work towards acceptance. Adapt means to kind of look at the situation now, given the restrictions you're in, and ask yourself, well, if I can't do X, Y, Z, can I do A, B, and C? I can't do that, but can I do this? What can I do? What usually happens is people say, oh, I can't do this anymore, I can't do that anymore, that's not working, I'm gonna be late. We blame and complain. But once you recognize, you accept the situation, you adapt by making the best use of the space and time you have. And then the final one is to allow. Allow simply means just allow things to unfold the way they need to. Look back on your life, and haven't you seen that somehow things worked out for you? Allow means to allow other people to be how they are and say what they say and do what they do. Don't lose your energy to judging others, to wishing things were different. The reality is things are exactly the way they are, and the reality is that we grow through all of our challenges. So if we want to maximally grow and minimally stress, then we accept, we adapt, and we allow. Those are my three words of the year that I've been using lately. So what I want you to really do is just trust. And I know it's hard to trust because we've been betrayed by people, we've been betrayed by life before it feels like it. But when we trust in the bigger picture and we recognize that if it's out of our control, at some point, we as human beings, being so resilient, we're able to adapt and rise to new levels. Think about it. Think about where you were a year ago and how much our lives have changed. And although there's been lots of challenge, what have you gained from all that's happened? We've gained so much. And if you look to see where you've gained, what new ideas you've had, what new methods you've come up with, when you can see the benefit of all the change, it helps us to embrace it a little bit easier. So from every crisis, I want to remind you that blessings emerge, and it's up to you to find them. If you don't look for them, it's going to feel horrible. If you look for them, you'll find that there are blessings in every challenge that we have. And there's always a reason for change, always, whether it's by choice to live a healthier and better lifestyle, or whether it's by chance, things happening to you that you don't want to happen. Thank you so much for this time with you today and for your attention. Troy, thank you for having me. I'm going to throw it back to you now.
Alice, that was awesome. It's even brighter in here. We always appreciate you spending time with us and sharing your words of wisdom with our clients. Once again, to all of our current clients, thank you for your trust, belief in our abilities, and friendship. We will never take those things for granted, and our entire team here works hard on a daily basis to never let those things down. For those of you that want to learn more about our financial planning process and how to make the most of whatever stage you're in, whether it's accumulation, protection, distribution, and transfer, because each stage is a facet of change, please contact one of our wealth managers, and we'd love to spend more time with you to share with you about our planning process. Alice, thank you again for sharing priceless information with us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. For everyone on our call today, thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Hana with a Purpose. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.